Very good afternoon, everyone. So, we are going to have today a complete discussion on international relations, MIB, as well as current affairs. What an irony! On this particular day itself, we have this major development coming from Bangladesh, where the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has resigned and she has fled the country. As per the most recent information, the army is saying that they will form an interim government in the nearest possible time. Furthermore, at least some of you will be reading newspapers and will be aware of this. Very major Supreme Court judgment in India has came up recently, which directs government to do this creamy layers of categorization, not just for OBCs, but extend this to SC and ST reservations. Something related to how politically sensitive news in India this has been. You can see a lot of comments from different political factions. You can see the comment from Mayawati last day, who asked for a constitutional amendment for the government to come above the Supreme Court judgment. See how sensitively people react, how sensitively people hold this element of whether it is opposing view to this reservation system or supporting views to this reservation system. A very similar chain of events which gone out of hand is exactly what happened in Bangladesh. We have a very brief overview of what has been happening. All these problems which led to Sheikh Hasina's fleeing of Bangladesh started from the 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War. Post-war, for those who participated in this liberation war, there were huge sentiments associated with them, and the then Prime Minister Mujibur Rahman, who was leader of this liberation movement, settled the matters. He offered quota system in government jobs, in civil services, in different other jobs for the veterans of this Bangladesh Liberation War of 1971. And it was well accepted within the Bangladesh community. It was not something which was way unjust or considered as unjust in 1970s or say 1980s. But over the time, what happens? Whoever who have this participated in this 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War, they have died or they have passed away. Now we have their children. Now we have the second generation of people who are claiming the reservations, who are getting the benefits of this reservation. Now, in 50 years down the line, what we see today is even the second generation is also, you can say, claiming reservations is over. Now, third generation of the families of veterans of this Bangladesh Liberation War started claiming using this reservation system. And people started questioning. They haven't participated in anything. They haven't faced any troubles of liberation of Bangladesh. Why it is a reservation system that is brought in to give justice to somebody who has fought for the country? Why it is being extended to the third generation of the people? This question is the root cause all the turmoil that we are hearing from Bangladesh. And beyond that, whenever this question, it is very, very important how the government responds to this. Sheikh Hasina, the party she belongs to, the reservations is more like a emotional setup. She is being attached to this. She is being emotionally connected to this, and she doesn't want the reservation system to go away. And when this anti-quota movement that intensified in say 2018, the first time it got intensified, and the High Court of this Bangladesh also came up with the judgment that there is no question on legality of this quota system. Now it gone in support of the government. Still, these people were totally unhappy, and this section of people who were protesting on the streets were getting support from much wider sections of the society. Consequence was that Sheikh Hasina has came up with a very sharp statement. She called for abolition of all reservations in the government jobs. Now, this is a very, very major steps, and this is not just affecting the veterans of 1971 liberation war. This is affecting a much wider section of the society. And what the consequence of this was, it brought a lot of sections of the people into this anti-quotation quota movement protest. People were concerned now their reservations, their preferential treatments in government jobs have been taken away by this set of developments. Fast forward 6 years down the line, 2014, we had this legal battle on this quota movement, and this legality of quota still going on in Supreme Court of Bangladesh. And the court came up with this judgment that 93% of the reservation should be based on merit, and only 7% is reserved for other sections, including these liberation war quotas. Now 7% from 56% that was earlier, bringing it down to 7%. What it essentially means is it is virtually eliminating the reservation systems. And it has intensified the protest last month. And we have seen very insensitive remarks from Sheikh Hasina also, saying the protesters as razakars, and huge other sections of the society has also got into this anti-quota movement. Now it is not just an anti-quota movement. This movement in last 2 weeks has taken the form of a non-cooperation movement. There were declarations for not paying taxes. There were declarations for stopping these public transport systems, including trains, including buses, and all other transportation systems. There were called off schools, colleges. Virtually, this country was brought into a standstill by these protesters. Again, the government offered for open talks with the protesters, but it was too late for any, you can say, mediation to happen. And to, as a kicking over the cup, government has came up with 3-day holiday period starting from 5th of August. And protesters was very clear. The intention is not anything else but to dilute this movement that is happening. And most recently, a group of veteran army people has also joined the protest. Now it was very clear the only solution to hold this turmoil that was happening in Bangladesh was only one thing, that is a complete change in leadership. New leadership that can look at this issue as a systemic issue. This was exactly what happened, and unfortunately it happened in a undemocratic way where the Prime Minister has to resign and flee to India, and the army is currently taking over the country. Now we'll see what the recent developments, what exactly is the further developments of this. So this is a broad picture on what exactly is happening in Bangladesh. Beyond that, let's come back to our today's session. We have international relations session. I know a lot of you giving mains will be running behind a lot of materials, writing tests. A lot of things will be happening to you. But what we present here, whether it is this international relations, 2 documents we are presenting in this class, in the portal you can download these documents. The first one is this international relations MIB, and the second one is this international relation current affairs, 40-50 pages ka 2 documents. And this exactly is the 2 documents you need to study for mains 2024. We have cycled this over last 2 years, 3 years, and we have seen international relations. You get 4 questions for 50 marks, 10 marks ka 2 questions, usually 15 marks ka 2 questions, and most of these questions are highly predictable. It's not like something out of the blue moon questions are coming. Questions are coming from the newspapers. Questions are coming from a pattern of developments that is happening. Even the nature of the questions is highly predictable. For example, we have a lot of issues happening between Israel and Iran. You might be well aware of this. There are claims to the heights that from 5th August, Third World War is going to begin. And we have claims that this Iran as well as Hezbollah, other groups are going to declare open war against Israel. A lot of news on humanitarian crisis that is happening in Gaza. What is important for prelims or sorry mains 2024 from all of this? You open the editorials, you will see n number of editorials of different sentiments, of different aspects. But what kind of questions we see in our exam point of view is only one thing: how it is going to affect India's interest. What is India's interest in West Asia? How it is going to affect India's interest in West Asia? Or what should be India? Should India do any calibration in its approach for policies towards countries in West Asia? We had this question when Iran signed this nuclear deal with US P plus 5 countries, P5 plus 1 countries. We had this question asked by UPSC where UPSC is not interested, or UPSC doesn't want you to learn what exactly is the specifics of this agreement, by when Iran has to like denuclearize itself, or what is the timeline. That is not important. What is important is how it is going to affect India's interest. So whatever development that is happening in XYZ point of the world, your point of interest should be how it is affecting India's interest. You might remember the question 2-3 years back UPSC asked on AUKUS, AU, KUS. Like we already covered this in the material also. Very similar nature of question that has been asked on this particular topic. That is, it is not asking you about what exactly is this agreement. It is asking you how this agreement is affecting India's interest, or India's foreign policy, or India's geopolitical positioning, how it is going to be affected by this particular agreement. So this is how, what is relevant for our examination. Being said, a lot of and already said that every single question is directly taken from the newspaper, from the editorials, from something that is happening around. But if you actually want to write very good answers, what you need is a fair understanding on how is India's relation with this XYZ country. For example, if you get a questions on, say, India's relation with USA, India's strategic importance of India relations with USA, you exactly the question is from current developments. Maybe some defense deal is being signed, maybe some XYZ agreement for technology transfer, all this being signed. That's why this is getting more important. That's why this particular question is being asked. Now, to answer this question effectively, you should have a broad picture on what is the evolution of India-USA relations, how it was after post-independence, how was India's non-alignment policies and this Cold World War geopolitics, how it was all interlinked, and how this took a very stern, sharp change in 2000s. From the Pokhran War to this 2008, the civil nuclear deal India signed, 123 agreement India signed with US, to the recent developments, including declaring India as a major defense partner. There has been a complete U-turn in India-USA relations, and how your answer should reflect this change in positions. What you exactly need, questions of course are being asked from current developments, but to answer these questions you need to have an overall picture of what is the exact context, that is the evolution context, what is the historic context of this particular country's relations with India. For example, the Sri Lanka question is coming, Sri Lanka strategic issues question. Your answer should have this Kachadev issue, island issue. Recently also a fisherman has been captured and there has been controversies going on. Kachadev Island issue, you cannot explain it without understanding what happened in 1971. What happened, what was the stance of Indira Gandhi, what is the stance of present government. Beyond understanding this, it is practically very difficult to answer this question. So, from international relations, the conclusion of all this discussion is, even though absolutely right questions are taken from newspapers, only questions are taken from newspapers or recent developments. Being said, if you want to comprehensively attempt this, if you want to absolutely excel this 50 marks that is being asked in GS paper 2, you need a layer of understanding of evolution of India's relations with these countries. Let me give you a little bit more detail on how exactly this can be done. Yeah, so how you should prepare these India relation with XYZ countries or XYZ regions, so not just countries, it can be a region also, like India's relation with European Union, EU, or India's relation with West Asia, India's relation with Africa, quite very important after this inclusion of African Union into this G20, after this G20 that happened in India. So in this whole context, how you should prepare different countries' relations with India. And we have a ready-made protocol for this. Let's study three dimensions. First one is value perspective. Second one is national interest. Third one is strategic. These are the three broad dimensions on which you should study India's relation with any XYZ countries, from value perspective, from national interest perspective, and thirdly from strategic perspective, whether it is a bigger country like China, USA, or Russia, whether it is a region like EU, West Asia, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, whether it is any neighboring countries like Pakistan or Myanmar or Bangladesh. These are the three heads you should learn about. And what should values include? Values should look for historical similarities, shared historical values. For example, you write about India and say US relations. You can, one of the classical introductions of writing any answer on India US relations, that is writing about freedom struggle. We both were colonies of Britain, and we both, through a series of freedom struggle, we have achieved the freedom. Similarly, you connect with any other country. Suppose you are talking about India, Bangladesh. Suppose a question comes. We have a shared history. We have been the same country till 1947. It's only in the partition we became two different countries. We have a lot of shared history. We have shared sites, historical sites. We have shared freedom struggle. We have shared leaders, Rabindranath Tagore, who has written the national anthem of Bangladesh also. So the point I'm making is learn about a brief on history. Next, what all should include in shared values? What is the political system? Even quad grouping, what we call the quad grouping as world's grouping of diamond democracies. Now, democracy is one of the common link between a lot of countries. For example, India, USA. Question on Australia, you can start writing about this shared value on appreciating democracy. Same goes with the other countries also. Same goes with the other countries like Japan. Similarly, going ahead, shared values can have culture. For example, you can, if a questions come from West Asia, how Indian and West Asian culture has similarities, how we have similar cuisine, how we have similar music, dance. Even a question on China, you can write about this popularity of Indian movies like RRR or Bahubali or Dangal, which has collected huge money from China. It's been a huge success in China. The importance of yoga, you can write about soft power. These are all elements of values. You can increase the list further on. So this is what we study on these values, every country separately. The second part I told you is the national interest. What exactly is national interest? The most important national interest for any XYZ country is the economic growth, GDP growth. The numbers matters. So economy. What is the economy relation with these countries? What you should learn in this? First, most and important thing, trade. We are still believing in a trade-led growth, exports-led growth. Higher the exports, higher the growth of the country, higher the, you can say, the GDP potential. So trade data, you should have a clear understanding, and trade data also have different elements, right? What is the exports from India? What is the imports from India? If for some countries these trade data numbers are too stark, for example, with China, we have an export numbers of just less than 16 billion, where we have an import of something like 101 billion. So collectively leading to a trade deficit of 85 billion US dollars. Now, that is a very huge numbers, and this is a concern between the trade relations between India and China. So you should be aware of this trade deficit numbers also. Otherwise, you should be aware of what exactly is the quantum of trade that is happening between the two countries. Again, should I remember the exact number like $15.82 billion? No, who cares? There is no need for exact numbers, but the range should be exact. For example, there is 100 billion trade that is happening. India is importing from China. You cannot write the 200 or 250. If it is 103 or 98, you can write 100. That's fair enough. Or you can show the range also. That is fair enough. But you cannot make this grave mistakes of citing something out of the ranges. So the range you should study for all these numbers with all these countries. Who is the greatest, largest trading partner of India? There has been a change in this last year. Still after the, especially after the COVID times, and we have these restrictions on Chinese investment, Chinese imports. For a couple of years, or you can say more than a couple of years, USA was India's major trading partner. But that position has been recaptured by China recently. Now China is India's largest trading partner. So these kind of changes, if it is happening, you can cite in your answers also. So trade is a very important component. What is the next component? Investment. Investment, again, you can have foreign countries investment in India. If it is US or Western countries, obviously we are looking for investment from these countries. We still is negotiating with Tesla to open its more, you can say, factories in India. If it is a African country, or if it is a Myanmar or neighboring countries, we are more interested in Indian investment in that country. But even for Bangladesh, we are interested in Indian investments in Bangladesh. So these numbers are quite very important. Rest, what all economic data you should prepare, that is, if there is an FTS, might have been aware that recently India is showing a lot of interest in FTAs. If you look at the profile of FTAs that is India is taking up, there was in 2000s, there was quite an interest in FTAs. We have signed this 2002, we signed this India ASEAN Free Trade Agreement. A lot of other free trade agreement has been signed during that phase. In 2011, we have this FTA, or you can say SEPA agreement with Japan. India has signed. But that was a momentous. So there was a pause after this 2011 agreement with Japan. Most of these, even with ASEAN FTA, what is the major concern? Post this FTA development, if you analyze, you have this economic survey, I think 2019 or so, economic survey have detailedly studied this. Most of the FTAs, what we see is post FTAs, the imports to India has gained a lot of momentum. They had benefited greatly out of these FTAs. But this cannot be said about the exports from India. They are still lagging behind, they are still struggling, and there has not been any great pickup from exports from India after signing different FTAs. And maybe due to this realization, maybe due to this India's incapability, you can say, to not exploit the provisions of this FTA, so not having favorable FTA agreements. All this lead to India's lack of interest in FTAs. After 2011 Japan FTA, next FTA we are signing is in 2021 after a gap of 10 long years. Now, Since 2021, there has been a renewed interest in FTAs. You might see every day India is in talks with one or the other country. We have a pre-FTA agreement, ECTA, that is signed with Australia. We have an FTA agreement with UAE. We have an FTA agreement that is already in place with this EFTA or European, certain set of European countries. We have been FTAs in talks between India and UK. Even we are accessing FTA agreement between USA and India. So you can see there is a blast of interest in FTAs post this COVID times. Why? Then we will see in this document why India is now looking for these FTAs. So FTAs is a very big economic component. What are other components of national interest? Further, you need to learn about energy. Most of our relations are depending on energy. See our relations with Russia. Post Russia-Ukraine war, we have more than 200 times increased the imports of oil from Russia. Why we increase this? Because we are getting cheaper oil. And why cheaper oil is so much important for India? Because 85% of India's crude oil requirements are met from exports, and this is one of the biggest component of dragging component on this import bill of India. So if India is accessing a cheaper oil from any XYZ country, India is very much interested to access this oil. This is what we see in the case of Russia. See the case of India's defining relations with West Asian countries. Even though we have other interests also, like the investment interest with UAE, but the detrimental, or you can say the dominating aspect of India's relations with the West Asia, that is the trade in oils, the energy security. India, or not just India, all the countries are going beyond oil. See this G20 agreement, G20 where India presided in 2023, we have seen this biofuel organization coming into existence. We have seen India taking the lead in International Solar Alliance, ISA. We have seen India coming up with Panchamrit targets, quite ambitious targets, like 15 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030. So this is the whole spectrum. Energy, economy, you can increase more aspect to this. Technology transfer, defense technology transfer. We can see this statement by this Indian Defense Minister Rajnath Singh to make India a defense technology hub. So we are already signing different technology transfer agreement. In defense, it is with General Electricals, with different US and Western companies. In semiconductor, yesterday we have an editorial on this Tata fabrication system, which has opened India's first indigenous semiconductor fabrication lab in Gujarat. It has tied up with a PMSC, which is a major fabrication company in Taiwan. So India is collaborating with Taiwan for technology transfer in semiconductor technology. So very much important aspect of national interest. Economy, energy, technology, more aspects you can add into this. You will see in the document we will have this much wider picture. Now the third component, that is strategy. What all to be included in strategy? The most important thing, that is the border issues, security related issues. If it is with Pakistan, we will speak about cross border terrorism. If it is with Pakistan, also we have border issues. With China also we have border issues. Even with Nepal, we have this Kalapani Nepal issue, border, again a border issue. With Sri Lanka, we have this Kachatiw issue. Other than we think about geopolitical issues. For example, we have seen this turmoil in Myanmar after this India out campaign. So how that is going to be affected? Then we can speak about Western sanctions, India's position on this Israel-Palestine, how it is all going to affect India. So geopolitical is another aspect. Again, climate change, disaster management, All these are different aspects of strategic dealing. So these are the broad areas you should prepare, starting from values. In values, you should speak about history, shared polity, shared culture, which include dress, cuisine, language, everything which you can relate with these particular countries. Then speak about national interest. National interest, the most important element is economy, trade, investment, which are all the commodities being exchanged. Then speak about energy. Energy, momentarily it is dominated by oil, but go beyond that. Speak about this non-renewable sector. Then technology, which is a very important component, not just in defense, in a lot of other sectors, we are looking for technology transfer. Then strategic components like border security, the security interest of our country, the geopolitical tack or relations with this particular country, the climate change, the disaster management related aspects. Now, if you have this broad framework in your mind, it becomes quite a cakewalk to generate points. It becomes quite a cakewalk to remember things if you study systematically. I hope you got a clearer picture, even though in the board it looks very look like a Bangladesh turmoil, but I hope things are much clearer to you. Yeah. So again, very important question you might be having in your mind is, okay, you have given a framework, you have given something great. What should we do with this? Should we already have some material? We already studied something, or should we make our materials through this again, or how to actually prepare through this framework? And if I take each and every country, say I take USA, from value I need to get 4-5 points, from economy, national interest to make say 7 and 10 points, from strategic again 7-10 points. Then issues, then what is contrasting issues, not just similarities. We have issues with USA, and what is the recent developments, then what is the way forward, what are different perspectives on this way forward. This much I have to prepare. I will take 1 hour, and for say 20 topics I will take 20 hours. And where is the time for doing all this for international relations? I'm going to write this year mains, and you're giving me such a huge task. At least somebody of you might be thinking so. So for this we have a solution here. Whatever we have discussed so far, the framework what we were discussing, we have consolidated all this information in this particular document, that is in international relations marks improvement booklet. See, for all these countries, for all these Indias, we are starting with some keywords, some key acronyms, which is quite very important, especially in the context of international relations. Your answer should look technical. Your answer should look to have certain technical aspects, and you need to include two different aspects for this. One is the keyword, which you can take from daily newspapers. Second is this acronyms basically means, even you might have remembered, whenever this Prime Minister Narendra Modi is visiting some conference, a G20 or any other XYZ conference, he comes up with some acronyms like 5C, 3T, 4I. So these kind of things you should remember, and you should note it down somewhere and use it when the context question comes in that context. These two elements are typically value addition elements, which will give a little bit of depth to your answers. Then from the framework we have discussed, from values, from national interest to strategic. In this order, we have made notes for India relation for each and every part of the syllabus basically. First part is the India and the neighborhood. It covers India, Pakistan, India, Nepal, India, Bhutan, India, Afghanistan, India, Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, and India, Myanmar. Then we have Indians' relations with major powers. Mostly we have covered only three countries, that is India's relation with China, with USA, and with Russia. Then we have India's relation with different regions like India and European Union, India and West Asia, and India and Central Asia, and India and Africa. Then we have detailed covered the diaspora, Indian diaspora, and we have by area wise from USA, Canada, Middle East, Africa, and Australia. We have covered what is the issues faced by diaspora, what is the number of diaspora is having, what is exactly the demands or way forward for these particular diaspora in all these different countries. So this basic work has been presented in this ethics marks improvement booklet. What I want you to do is keep in mind the framework which I have discussed earlier. Whatever you are reading, you should have we are adding points to these aspects. We're not simply mugging up all the facts. We know what we have to take from each and every material, and based on that we are learning things. Keep that framework in mind and learn this material, read this material, sit and read this material. It's just 50 pages with advertisement content, all of this, it's roughly around 40 pages. There is no excuse you cannot do these 40 pages. So these are some of these definitions, keywords I have been talking about. Let's discuss some of examples like real politic and moral politic. Very much we can see in news, especially the death of this famous diplomat from US in November last year. So after this, real politics is so much in news. What exactly is the real politics? Politics based on power and practicality rather than politics based on ideology. For example, India's continued defense ties with Russia despite Western sanctions and engagement with Iran for oil imports. Again, what is India's moral stance? We have this, so after independence we have this Nehruvian idealist politics, or you can say non-alignment movement, where India doesn't completely align with either of the Soviet or US factions, and India will have its stance, issue-based stance. And throughout the history, India has stayed strongly against this aggressor. And this stance was based on India's moral understanding. This moral stance was what India was offering to the world, and this moral stance was breakdown in India's stance with Russia during this in Russia-Ukraine war. Of course, India stood for peace, and of course, India stood to, you can say, nullify the tensions between Russia and Ukraine. But India was not ready to take the economic sanctions, which was the West's most powerful tool against Russia, that is sanctioning Russia. But India was not ready to agree with the West on these lines, and India continued to buy Russian oil. If you look at the numbers of Russian GDP, you will not see any negative growth rate. Country that is already in war, a country that is already in war and facing sanctions from Western countries. It means cannot directly export oil. Still, this country is having positive economic growth. That's wonder. And how Russia was able to do that, because two major market economies of the world, one is India, second one is China. Both these countries doesn't sided with West to economic sanction on Russia. And this is one of the classical examples of real politics in contemporary times. Moral politics, that is completely opposite of this. Politics based on moral principles. Politics based on, not based on power, but principles. For example, India's commitment to this Paris climate agreement, or India's humanitarian aid policies India is doing to Afghanistan or Indonesian countries, All this is based on moral values, moral principles. Then we have a lot of keywords here. Swing state. What is a swing state? A country whose strategic choice significantly impact the global order due to its geopolitical influence, economic power, and diplomatic capabilities. A country that is punching above its weight. That is what a swing state is. And two, in many sectors, India is considered as a swing state. You might have remembered, even in artificial intelligence regulation discussion, the role of India, the leadership role India can play, that is considerably huge. Dowell Doctrine. What is Dowell Doctrine? It came into news especially after the surgical strike of 2018. That is offensive defense strategy. That means assertive policy, foreign policy that is willing to use military and non-military means. It is not a defensive foreign policy. It is ready to give a strike and take the position that is due. Gujarat Doctrine, I.K. Gujral, India's, I guess, 12th Prime Minister of India, I.K. Gujral, which still holds relevance. I think it's around this year, around last year or this year, somewhere it is the 25th anniversary of Gujarat Doctrine. So what is the relevance? Is this doctrine still relevant? Understand what exactly is the relevant. It is mostly related to how India should deal with its neighboring countries, and how India should deal with its neighboring countries. India should refrain from raising bilateral issues, and India should consider what is happening in this country as the internal matter of these countries. And India should use this to build trust, goodwill with smaller neighbors. India should adopt a big brother approach and act unanimously towards neighboring by offering them help, assistance without demanding anything in return. There should not be any reciprocity in relationship. Non-reciprocal relationship should be there. If there is a requirement in XYZ country, India should proactively give assistance. For example, when this economic crisis, the balance of payment crisis happened in Sri Lanka, India was in the forefront to give help. Even this continuous negotiation with IMF was not substantially taking off. Then during the time, India was at the forefront to solve the issues, even if it is by extending certain line of credit, even if it by extending certain even goods and services. A lot of activities India has been in forefront. That is how India should respond to the neighbors, and India should not expect the same reciprocity from these countries, because they are positioning and India's positioning are completely different. India should adopt an asymmetric approach in dealing with smaller countries, giving them more than what they give to India in order to build cooperative and friendly relations. India should emphasize dialogue, confidence, building measures, conflict resolution rather than adversarial positions with its neighbors. India would try to resolve all bilateral issues through peaceful negotiations and would avoid using aggressive or threatening language. So these are fundamental principles of Gujarat Doctrine. Then we have Manmohan Doctrine, which take a pacifist stand, which take a pragmatic stance, economic stand, to put things into perspective. What was Manmohan Doctrine in the context of China? We all know we already have a undemarcated borders with China. And these Aksai Chin and these claims over Arunachal Pradesh, this is not just start within 2024. It has been there since decades. And it has been a point of, you can say, conflict between India and China. But what was Manmohan Doctrine to handle China in this context? Manmohan Doctrine says, of course, we have all these issues. And the solution to all these issues is not to rely to violence. The solution is only through dialogue. We should sit and talk and deal with all these matters. But we have our own sovereign interest. We have non-compromisable interest, and it will take time. We cannot solve the Arunachal Pradesh or Aksai Chan issue in simple talking one day. So let these talks go on. Let these high-level talks go on. Being said, these talks or sometimes these issues in unresolved borders should not affect India's economic relations with China. We should have an open economic relation with China. despite having border issues. That was what Manmohan doctrine with respect to China was. Even Manmohan doctrine speaks about extending this approach to Pakistan. So economic dealing with any XYZ country should form the basis, should form in Karl Marx terms, should form the structure on which you can build the political and other superstructures. Yeah, new Panchsheel principles you can read. I'm not speaking on every single thing because then we will have to talk till tomorrow morning. So hard power, soft power, what exactly is this? New Cold War, that is the trade tensions basically between US and China. New regionalism approach. We can see a rise in interest in minilaterals. What are minilaterals? These are these regional groupings. Like BRICS, you have seen already seen in 2023, we have admitted 6 more countries. And today, 2 days back, the editorial, if you have gone through, you have seen this Southeast Asian countries are now showing interest to join BRICS. We have already India's, Pakistan and Iran already have joined SCO framework. So strategic alignment, new Cold War. So in rising interest in multilaterals, that was what I'm speaking about. Neighborhood first policy, debt trap diplomacy, that is using of loans to gain influence over debtor countries. China is being accused of doing this in Sri Lanka and Bandota port and all. China is also accused to have done this in Pakistan. You might have heard about this massive power cut that has happened in Pakistan. Almost the whole country's power was brought to standstill. And why have they have done this? It doesn't happen because of any natural disaster. It happened simply because Pakistan refused to give XYZ money to these companies which are operating this power distribution in Pakistan. And these companies were run by Chinese. And they simply cut off the power. So you countries strategic position, or you can country's interest as a country for these Chinese investors. We have seen the element of this in Africa, in Sri Lanka, in Pakistan. Most of the countries who have long-term agreements or long-term investment taken from China has gone into some kind of debt crisis. Salami slicing strategy, achieving strategic objective through incremental actions. Suppose say China has to take these borders, they want to move their control from here to here. If they move their borders from here to here, one day there will be severe protest from India. Indian army will come from this side and push them back. So what they do is they take one step one day. Next day they will come take next step. Very small incremental steps. And culmination of this will be over a period of time without making it a sensational news or without taking anger from the opposition country, they will have acquired the strategic territory. This is what is called a salami slicing strategy. Hydro hegemon, very, very important. China is building much bigger dams on this lower basin of Brahmaputra. So China is one country where a lot of cross-country rivers are beginning, and China is refusing to sign water deals or water agreements with any of these lower basin countries. So again, hydro hegemon, India's delivery deficit. Famous for India is famous for every project we write editorial for 10 years. Then when we start moving, it moves at such a slow pace. For next 10 years we will be constructing it, and for God knows when it will be completed. This what is exactly called as India's delivery deficit. Neocolonialism, string of pearls, necklace of diamonds, psychological warfare, antagonistic cooperation, which is competitive yet cooperative relation between countries. Example, US, China. There is a lot of areas convergence of interest, yet they are competing with each other. De-hyphenation policy, which is India's policy, especially in the West Asia, where India will independently deal with Iran, with Saudi Arabia, with Israel, with Palestine. And India's relation with one country should not come in place or in as a hindrance to India's relations with any of the other countries. Golden Crescent, Golden Triangle, which is in the context of drug cartels or drug centers that is existing in nearby India, how it affects India's internal security. Track to diplomacy, which is gaining a lot of traction in the recent times. Track to diplomacy, what it is: unofficial dialogue between non-governmental entities, initiatives like Indian and Pakistani scholars to discuss bilateral aspects. Lot of keywords which is taken from newspapers. You can use this, but you have to revise this a number of times so you can remember it during the time of examination. Then we have these acronyms, as I told. Acronyms include acronyms like where it went. Yeah, acronym like SAGAR, Security and Growth for All Inter-Region. When you're writing about Indo-Pacific, what you're writing about India's role in Indian Ocean region, you should incorporate the idea of Sagar, Sankalp, skill acquisition, knowledge and awareness for livelihood promotion. Similarly, 5S strategy, which is in the context of India's guiding international relations. 5S is about Samman, Samvad, Sahyog, Shanti and Samriddhi. Similarly, 3C, commerce, connectivity and culture, which is mostly India's connections with Southeast Asia, defining. 4C, which is collectiveness, consistency, continuity and consensus, which is India's relation with BRICS. Similarly, we have 3D, democracy, demography and demand, which is the strength of India. If you want to define in 3 words, it is democracy, demography and demand. 3T, which speaks about tradition, talent and technology. 2I, which is speaking about India's import and India's image. I4C, that is inclusiveness, indigenization, innovation, integratedness. SAT, which is Solar Alliance, Agricultural Cooperation and Trade. We have lot of different keywords or acronyms are provided here. Health framework, strength framework, FDI framework, all this you can utilize in your answers. Let's go ahead. Again, I will give you a brief how this material is being designed. I'm not going to speak each and everything about this document. This is more like a content based approach. All these are self-explanatory, nothing rocket science is written here. And for somebody who is reading newspapers for a while, for somebody who has learned some sort of international relations, there is nothing you cannot understand from this document. But to make the best use of it, you should be aware in your mind about these frameworks we have discussed, which speaks about values, national interest and strategic interest. And you should connect each and every point with these. Then it makes sense. Then you can replicate these points in the examination. Otherwise, it's a huge collection of facts which can get you confused. So see this India-Pakistan relations, we have this value perspective, cultural heritage, linguistic similarities, culinary traditions, family social fabric, passion for cricket, then historical aspects of India-Pakistan relations. Then we have national interests, economic relations between India and Pakistan. Then we have strategic perspective, we have this Kashmir issue, cross-border terrorism, nuclear deterrence, water sharings, China factor, Afghanistan, all this playing its role. Some aspects, recent developments that is happened like Balakot airstrike in 2019, abrogation of 317 2019, ceasefire agreement in 2021, Kartarpur corridor that also have opened, COVID-19 cooperation, So all these have recently developed different school of thoughts on how India should handle Pakistan and some points on way forward. As you can see here, all these points are designed in such a way that you can exactly replicate this in your answer papers. There is not a single word given in these both documents, MIBs as well as the current affairs documents, which you cannot use in your examination papers. This is not for your understanding. This is a material that is optimized for your answer writing preparation for mains 2024. So just go through this material, try to replicate the points. As I always say, when you write answers, whether it is for test series, whether it is for one two questions you are writing at home, whether it is writing actual mains, when you see the topic, say we have questions came on India EU relations, where you have read this, which notes you have read this, which is this color of the pages, design of the pages, this should come into your mind, and it is from the knowledge of your notes you should be able to replicate the points. You're not doing this exercise if you're writing just what is coming into your mind. मन की बात लिख रहा है, आपको कभी marks नहीं आएगा. There will be always marks will stagnate around these average marks. If you want to increase your marks beyond this average, you have to have very strong solid notes, which I am offering you here. But you need to revise this say 4 times 5 times so that you are well acclimatized to this, you are well familiar with this, know what is the dynamics given here. At least for 60-70% of whatever you are writing in the papers, you should be writing it exactly from your notes, and then you can see the substantial change in quality of answers you are replicating. Otherwise, मन की बात सब लोग लिखेगा. This is a competitive examination. It's not school examination which you are writing just to pass it. So try to keep these things in mind and utilize this document. So we are not too much extending our discussions on this particular document. In the same format for each and every aspect is being defined in this document. You can go through this. On that note, we will go to the next major discussions of the day, that is current affairs related to international relations. So this we will be explaining in little bit more detail. Let's get started. You're watching online, you have any doubts, you can ask in the live chat. I hope all of you are with me. Continuing the lecture, let's move ahead. Let's move to the next major topic. Yeah. So current affairs related to international relations. So how this particular document is designed? Again, I'm saying you don't just simply read this document first. First, read the MIBs. First, understand the framework, read the MIBs, then read this particular document. Because the base understanding questions, obviously, you are going to get more questions from this document, not from the first document. But if you want to write good answers, if you want to write like exceptional answers which can take your marks from 80s to 100s or say 90s to 120s, then follow this system. First, understand the framework. Second, read the MIB. Then we open this current affairs document. We have fairly analyzed each and every editorial that is being asked, came in Indian Express as well as the Hindu newspapers in last 1 year, more than 1 year for say. And many of the editorials, as you are already aware, they are repetition, they are non-relevant to our examination. We have shortlisted the editorials and prepared what exactly is needed from each and every editorials that is came in news. and roughly around 40 topics we have got. Many of the topics you might be, somebody of you might be thinking that 40 topics, you studied all the tutorials and you got only 40 topics. It's not so. Many of the topics we have covered in the MIB documents. If something is happening related to India-China relations, or say India-Pakistan relations, or India-US relations, that dimensions we have covered in our MIB document. In this document, something which is not covered, like if you are a little bit aware, this previous document I have shown, there is no whatsoever mention of, say, international, no whatsoever mention of world organizations. There is nothing about BRICS or WTO or any XYZ organizations. So again, that's a missing link which we have covered here. Which organizations are important from exam point of view? That organization which is in news. So we have covered this organization in detail in this particular document. Yeah. So again, the first topic you can read here is International Relations Vision for Vikasit Bharat 2047. Again, Vikasit Bharat 2047, that is a broader vision for development the government has been promoting, or you can say highlighting. So this is quite very important. You go through any of the particular, say, website, ministry websites of government of India, you will find something related to this Vikasit Bharat 2047. So when you are writing your answers, not just for international relations, be it for other subjects, be it for, say, agriculture, be it for science and technology, also we have covered this topic, be it for society, some topics, your answers should have some dimensions related to Vikasit Bharat 2047. So what is the vision of India economically? We are trying to become 30 trillion economy by 2047. Supply chain resilience is being highlighted. We are looking at a multipolar world. What exactly is multipolar world? Multipolar, we are like, through the Cold War phase, we have seen the world as a bipolar world where there is Soviet Union at one end and USA at the other end. Still this breakdown of this Soviet Union in 1991, we have seen a unipolar world where there is only one superpower in the world, that is USA. Now it is only in the very recent past we have seen some challenges to USA. Which are these challenges? These challenges like taking over of Hong Kong, challenges like threatening of Taiwan, challenges like occupying Indo-Pacific by China or flexing its muscles in Indo-Pacific in China. It is only in the very, very recent past we are seeing China as a competitive element to US unipolar world vision. And this is bringing world into some kind of inflection period where the unipolar vision that was envisaged by US is getting challenged by China. And what is India's take on this? India has never believed in unipolar vision or bipolar vision. India always stood for multipolar vision, where there should be a lot of competing superpowers, including USA, Russia, or China, India, or other countries like European Union or UK or Germany, etc. Similarly, another important non aspect, or you can say the value aspect India is still holding on to, is this non-alignment movement, strategic autonomy. That is the new keyword for this. That means the idea is both the same. That means India is not completely aligned with any of the superpowers. India will take its stance on issue based model. And what is, like, we have seen this America first movement, the Trump is igniting this America first movement in US. Similarly, we have a India first approach towards India, which we have seen in this India Russia, we have seen in this oil deals, that is India is continuing to buy from Russia. We have this India first approach. So strategic autonomy or non-alignment, that is be continued. Regional leadership, that is another very important aspect. Two basic regions are of very much interest to India. The first one is this Indian Ocean region. We will deal this in this detail. Second is this Act East policy. Similarly, we have soft power and cultural diplomacy, like cultural exchanges, diaspora exchanges, educational initiatives, global initiatives like climate change, sustainability initiatives. We have this CDRI, we have ISA, different organizations. India is already taking the leadership positions. Global South advocacy, like India's role as a leader of Global South, that is quite important for India's Viksit Bharat vision. We have seen this vaccine Maitri initiative where India has sent vaccines to more than 114 countries, which is shows India's ability to hold the leadership position, pole position of Global South. Similarly, technological innovation, you can speak about digital India, you can speak about the UPI, the strength of banking system, which even Prime Minister has spoken in the parliament. And India is quite an innovation hub with startup revolution that is undergoing in the country, and ethical frameworks, which is quite very important with advent of our new technologies like artificial intelligence, deep fakes, good governance and global standing, participative governance, collaborative governance, transparency and accountability. These are the like broad frameworks of Viksit Bharat 2047. Mostly you will not be getting a question on this, but your answers, especially your conclusions, not just in IR but in every papers, should have some references to Viksit Bharat 2047, the vision. The government has also released a document we have shared in our Telegram group one day, so you can go through that. Just get yourself a little bit acclimatized with this. If an economic question, write about 30 trillion target, economic target by 2047. So this should be our approach. Second, let's discuss some of the key issues. Especially let's start with China. China, what is China's again? If you look at a brief of what China is doing, China, you can see till 1990s. That is why we are speaking about 1991, because that is when India has done these LPG reforms, liberalization, privatization, and globalization reforms. India has opened its economy, India has opened its market in 1990. If you look at this per capita income, or you can say the GDP size of India and China from independence in 1947 to 1991, we have been fairly being identical. There has not been considerable gap between India and China. But post 1990, China has in last say 30-35 years, China has outperformed in India in almost every economic areas. And this consistent outperform, China is today a say 24-25 trillion economy, while India is still a say 3-4 trillion economy. You can see this huge gap between India and China. This huge gap is seen in military funding, in technology funding, in economic relations, in you can say even in Olympics is going on in Olympics medal also you are seeing this stark difference between India and China. And not just with China, India, this is evident with other countries. Till 2010s, if you remember, there has not been so much of a border clashes with China. Not just for India, for other countries also. Why it was so? Because it was China's phase of building strength. China's phase of building strength means it will not create a, how is China acquiring its growth? China is acquiring its growth from the economic deals it is getting from the West. These deals are very much important for China, and it will not compromise on these deals. It will not say, it will not take back from these deals. These deals are very important, so they are not going to make West angry. So they will keep quiet and they will build their strength. Build their strength means they will expand their economy, they will build submarines, they will build their nuclear bombs, nuclear technologies, they will build fighter aircrafts, they will build higher technologies, defense capable technologies, including anti-satellite technology and likewise. So that is a phase of building strength. That was why we were not seeing China in our borders. But once the Communist Party or these intellects in China started believing that Of course, we have gained enough strength. We have much ahead than most of our neighbors, including India. So now we can have little bit more stake in things that is happening, at least in our neighborhood. Which is China's neighborhood? It is the borders with India. Which is China's neighborhood? It is the borders, ocean borders with Japan. It is this South China Sea. You can see in all these areas, there are border issues, the Senkaku issues with Japan. You can see the crisis that has happened in South China Sea, where China has border issues with all these countries which have never shared any borders with China. China has been building these artificial islands in this South China Sea and claiming different areas of South China Sea. We have seen Indian borders, we have seen direct clashes happening in 2020 at Indian borders. Just give me a second. So what exactly we are seeing right now? What we are seeing right now is China is flexing its muscles where it can flex its muscle. It cannot flex its muscles in Pacific Ocean, or it cannot flex its muscles in Atlantic Ocean, because at this it doesn't have military capabilities to prove its strength there. Maybe US still has, who has a global power, US still has military strength to send his submarines or say warships or any XYZ defense equipments to any part of the world. It has military bases much distributed across the world, while China doesn't. What China has is strength in its neighborhood, and the heat is being felt by almost all neighbors, including India. Now, what is the next stage? Next stage is when China started to question US authority systems. China started question US based organizations, or you can say this Bretton Woods organization, starting from UN reforms, UNSC reforms, World Bank, or this dollar based global trading system. All these, the World Bank, IMF, all these systems are being challenged by China. So this is a much broader infighting that is happening. What we see today as a trade war between US at one hand and China at one hand. This is not a, you can say, confined to say tariffs or black banning some XYZ export or import from this country or that country. This is a competition that is happening for, this is a competition that is happening for this global pole position, and from different aspects China is reaching a level of say, threatening US autonomy, or you can say threatening US pole position. This is going to be continued in upcoming world. And what is India's response to all of this? Now, India's response, if you want to learn, India had two different types of responses. Do you have any comments? Yeah, India had two. Thakur Karan Singh, good evening, Thakur. Yeah, what is Indian response to all these infightings that is happening? Is it good for India that China and USA is fighting? It is good for India for some aspects. Like if you look, have a narrow vision, it is obviously good for India. Like some of the exports of which were happening from China, they are relocating to India, they are relocating to Vietnam, they are relocating to other parts of the world. Fishing industry, India has captured good amount of fishing export market. That happened to because of this increased tariff on these Chinese products. There are certain areas India has benefited out of this trade war that is going on between USA and China. But look at the whole picture. When tariffs are being increased, it is not just increased on China, it is increased on India also. we speak about this Chinese limiting Chinese exports, because Chinese exports to India is obvious detrimental beyond 10 particular numbers. But being said, many of these Chinese exports to India are raw materials for Indian manufacturing base. So if you want to increase exports from India at certain industries, we definitely need exports from China. You can see the global in supply chain interlinkages playing a bigger role, and the final say in what exactly should be the trading relations. So if bigger tariffs are coming, then it is obviously going to backfoot Indian exports also, not just to China, to US and other countries. So in broader picture, having higher tariffs or having a deglobalization approach, that is detrimental to India's interest, even though it narrowly some specific industries India has took benefits of this. Now, what is India's approach to, again, we have spoken about US, China. What is India's approach to this growing China problem? We have multifaceted approach. In Indo-Pacific, or you can say in water, our policy is aligned with USA, because USA is the major stakeholder in waters. You might have heard about India's policy of counterbalancing by bringing other powers into its area of strength. And what this is culminating into, we have seen different organizations like Quad, which is a grouping of diamond democracies like India, Australia, USA, Japan. Similarly, we have seen IPEF, Indo-Pacific Economic Corridor. So these agreements, what it is putting forward is, it is in line with India's idea of countering China by bringing similar-minded countries together. Who are the similar-minded countries? Australia, Japan, USA. You might have seen India has tried an FTA agreement, pre-FTA agreement with Australia. Why pre-FTA agreement with Australia? Not because Australia is and India came profoundly together and signed this agreement. During COVID times, Australia, one of the major country who stayed with the Trump's allegations that COVID virus was created by China. And how China responded to this? China started militarizing their trade deals, militarizing their hold over the supply chain. They put phytosanitary measures, or you can say final phytosanitary barriers on different exports that is coming from Australia, especially the beef products, especially the dairy products, the agro products. Stringent phytosanitary measures were put on these, and they virtually banned all exports from Australia. And this has already, COVID-19 is happening, already the exports and global markets, everything is down. In this context, they have put Australia in a very tough positions. And what is the learning out of this? China started utilizing or militarizing its economic strength that is available. And this is when Australia started looking to diversify its trade relations. And whichever country which is looking for diversification of trade relations, India is in the forefront, and Australia is coming closer to India. On the other hand, you can see militarization also taking place in Indo-Pacific, like the AUKUS agreement was signed during this phase. Why it was signed? Again, Australia no more sees a non-militarized Indo-Pacific. Australia wants to protect its interest in Indo-Pacific. Again, it is in line with India. You can see about what is India's vision in Indo-Pacific, rule-based global order. And this is exactly what Australia is also standing for, rule-based global order. And so we are also coming together again. So closeness of India and Australia, this is more to do with what is exactly the global precipitation that is happening in the near past. So what China is doing, China is playing its game again. It came with a map with special names, Chinese names given to different cities in the Arunachal Pradesh. These are the major issues of border areas with China. First, we have this Aksai Chin, which is already taken by China, but India claims these parts. Secondly, we have a little bit settled these middle borders, Then we have eastern borders, which is also called as this McMahon line, where the Arunachal Pradesh, which is India, is currently having it. But China says that this is eastern Tibet, or you can say China want to occupy it. China, according to China, this is their territory, which is illegally occupied by India. So, what are the consequences of this? What are the way forward? How India should address these developments? That is all given here. You can go through this particular document. Yeah, let's move ahead. India China Taiwan conflict. What is happening with Taiwan? What is this origins of China Taiwan conflict? Taiwan, when this, it is all again origins in this civil war that happened in China, that culminated in 1948. When this civil war culminated in 1948, there were two parties who were having stake in forming government in China. The first one was the Nationalist Party. They have shifted themselves to this Taiwan, and that Nationalist Party is what occupying Taiwan today. Secondly, there was Communist Party, which occupied the China mainland, and that is currently continuing this China mainland. So at the end of the day, do we have two China? One in the form of China mainland, and another in the form of China Taiwan? Obviously, theoretically, we have two Chinas. But what is China doing, or you can say when we refer to China, mainland China doing to counter this? They have came up with one China policy, which states that there is only one China, and Taiwan is obviously a part of it. Taiwan, Tibet, all these countries are not independent countries; they are obviously a part of it, and they have restricted other countries to form formal bilateral relations with countries, including Taiwan. Even I guess India doesn't have bilateral, direct, formal relations with Taiwan, even though we are too much interested in Taiwan. Why we are interested in Taiwan? Again, that is our more higher chance of questions being asked, because Taiwan is the powerhouse of super semiconductors. We have already spoken, like the India's having so much interest in semiconductor fabrication industry. All our semiconductor demand is met by imports. We need to build an industrial base in India. You might have heard India has allocated 20,000, more than that, crore rupees under this PLI scheme to establish this semiconductor industrial base in India. And Taiwan is one country which can do great support to India in the form of technology transfers, in the form of expertise, in the form of, you can say, employment opportunities in this sector, skill development in this sector, bringing in investments, bringing in companies to India. In all these aspects, Taiwan is a country which is quite very important for India's semiconductor dreams. And that is, in this context, we have this rising China Taiwan tensions. And what is India's stake in Taiwan? That is this economic impact, especially the semiconductor supply, strategic alliances, border tensions, regional power dynamics, military preparedness. All these play its role. All these are different stakes of India along with what is happening between China and Taiwan. So what you should learn from, more importantly, a brief idea of what exactly is the Taiwan-China issue. Any recent developments that has happened, you should be aware of this. Beyond that, it is all about how it is interesting, impacting India's interest. India-Canada relations, again, it has been going through an absolute turmoil phase, India-Canada relations. On one hand, we have already established a very strong, you can say, foreign community in Canada, being having huge amount of people migrating to Canada. On the other hand, we have a complete stalemate in diplomatic relations with Canada. You should understand what is the broad issues. Reason for deterioration in India-Canada relations: allegations of assassinations. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused Indian agents of involvement in assassination of Sikh leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar on Canadian soil in June 2023, leading to diplomatic expulsions from both the sides. So this has taken much more scale. The Khalistani leaders has been murdered in Canada, and Canada is accusing India is behind all this. Khalistani separatism, trade negotiation process, even if India is talking about FTAs agreements, even with USA, we have took a complete pause on any particular trade agreement with Canada. Then economic impact, diaspora dynamics. Again, diaspora dynamics, obviously diaspora is ambassadors of India in foreign land. Obviously they play a very great role in, they already played a very great role, like the 123 agreement. They played a absolutely great lobbying in favor of India in US to bring the public opinion in support of India. But that is not always the case. If you look at this diaspora in Canada, what you can see, around 2% of this Canadian population, at least in some states, are of Indian origin people, and they constitute huge amount of political swing, which can swing the particular state in elections. And most of these are people are from Sikhs, and this is a major reason why there is promotion of Sikh sentiments through Khalistani movements in Canada, because they are a swing vote bank, and whether it is the party of Justin Trudeau or the other party, they want to capitalize this swing set of voters. That is a major reason why we can see greater interest in Sikh matters taken up by Canada. Similarly, rest you can read from the document. India Maldives relations, what we seen is a very stringent India out campaign in Maldives, started from this political election of President Mohammad Muizu. And India has also responded very strongly by citing Lakshadweep as a tourist spot, the Prime Minister's timely visit to Lakshadweep. Then India has came up with a diplomatically tackling this issue without further escalations, even though why it's India too much important to Maldives, you might have already aware, are the highest source of tourism income. Indians are like highest XYZ bringing these remittances, or you can say the foreign money to Maldives, and all this is being under threat due to this India Out campaign and this stringent responses taken by our beyond this. Rest, what is the other issues between India and Maldives, like the military presence of India in Maldives, diplomatic issues, growing Chinese influence, all this you can write about. What is the way forward? You can write about this. Kachdev controversy. What exactly is the Kachdev controversy? Who is the historical owner of this particular region? Again, this comes in the midst of these areas claim of India as well as Sri Lanka. And what is the major point of controversy is this 1974 agreement. What does the 1974 agreement say? The island was ceded to Sri Lanka under this Indo-Sri Lankan Maritime Agreement signed by Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and Srimarao Bandaranaike to demarcate the maritime boundary. Again, there is a lot of questions being asked. This was just a, you can say, executive agreement signed by the then Prime Minister of India Indira Gandhi and the counterpart in Sri Lanka. But again, there is, if you remember, in 2015 we have this exchange of these island pockets of areas that is entrapped in Bangladesh. So this exchange was facilitated by a constitutional amendment which has been constituted for this. So if you are ceding a part of your territory to another country, there is need for a constitutional amendment, but that was not done in this particular case. So there is a lot of question on what is exactly this legal status of Kachdev. Again, it is quite strategically important for India, considering mostly there is no inhabitant population there, only this fishermen communities which go for fishing. They use this island for say resting, or you can say they for drying off their nets or drying off some of their fishes. All these for activities this island is being. There is no permanent residence in this particular island. Sri Lanka recently joined RCEP. Again, Sri Lanka, we already have the one question regarding India-Sri Lanka relations. Sri Lanka, if you've seen, has gone through a very deep phase. Then it has recently coming out of that, you can say, the crisis phase. Now there are two learnings for India. In India also you have the editorial regarding this also. And I think the Hindu. We have also have a lot of environmental claims, environmentalists who are arguing for India also should have this completely organic based agriculture or farming. India should also limit the fertilizers, the pesticides, citing this critical impact it is having on these particular crops, particular other areas as well, other areas of environment as well. But what we've seen in Sri Lanka, what Sri Lanka's crisis, it started with this arbitrary policy making. That policy making is not based on any rationale. On one morning, Sri Lanka has abolished all these chemical fertilizers in the country. Now, if you are abolishing fertilizers, chemical fertilizers in the country, obviously it is a noble act. It has a noble vision that the country is completely transforming into organics. In India also we can see the state of Sikkim has took this step of completely going into organics. But when government is taking this step, what you expect on the other hand is there should be enough measures to take two things into consideration. If a country completely stopped using chemical fertilizers, there will be a stringent fall in the productivity, the output, agricultural output, where it will put the pressure on it, put the pressure on food security of the country. Is there a counter plan to address these measures? It reflects on this agricultural income of the farming community. Is there a plan to meet this agricultural deficit, income deficit for the farmers? In both these aspects, the country was completely caught unaware of. There was no policy solution put in place for all these. And this has pushed Sri Lanka into a food crisis kind of situations. It was during this time, 2018, there was this Christchurch, this blast of in the church that happened in Sri Lanka, were around, I don't know, 170 or some people or people have died, including foreign tourists. And this have created a lot of negative image on Sri Lanka, where the foreign tourists stopped visiting the country, which was a huge source of their another source of income. Now, above all of this, in 2020, we had COVID-19 coming up, which completely brought the whole world into standstill. And all these factors combinedly act together to push Sri Lanka into a situation of balance of payment crisis. Now again, if you put one more layer to all these developments, why this was happening, there is one major reason, that is arbitrary policy making. Why arbitrary policy making is happening? Because the polity of Sri Lanka was dominated by dynasty politics. The polity of Sri Lanka was controlled by this Rajapaksa family or one particular family. All the ministers are from these particular families. All these XYZ major positions are held by people from these families. And this led to conflict. This led to conflict with public interest. The decisions, the public decisions of the country are not taken in the public decisions. So it was basically a politico-economic crisis that pushed Sri Lanka into something like a balance of payment crisis, where people were running for food, running for fuel, where people even threw the president out of his home. It was very tough times, and it was during that time India has came up with sided with Sri Lanka. Even when this deal for IMF was not able to be finalized, India was in the forefront to help Sri Lanka. And obviously, when discussing all of this, we have missed the point of Chinese loans that has been coming into Sri Lanka over the last 2-3 decades. The debt trap diplomacy of the China, which Hambantota port and all, which also made things worse in Sri Lanka. And one of the peculiar thing, if you notice, when the Sri Lanka moved into crisis, Mostly you have seen when Iran moved into crisis, China came up and signed a 25-year deal with Iran. But when Sri Lanka moved into crisis, when Pakistan moved into crisis, China was there to help out Pakistan many times. But when Sri Lanka moved into crisis, China took a backhold sitting. Why? Because there was accusation the reason for the crisis in Sri Lanka is China. China don't want its bad image to move further, and it simply stepped out of its responsibility of helping Sri Lanka. And it was India that do all the good work, and so along with other international organizations. So now the things are changing, started to change in Sri Lanka. Now Sri Lanka is trying to expand itself, diversify itself, and one of the major steps that has been taken in this regard is Sri Lanka joining RCEP. RCEP is this ASEAN plus 6 countries, the free trade agreement between ASEAN plus 6 countries. Now India hasn't joined RCEP. There were some of the major contentions between why India doesn't join RCEP. In the last moment, India has to withdraw from this particular agreement. Why India withdrew from this agreement? Because India doesn't believe that it will benefit to itself. Which aspect it was concerned about? It was concerned about dairy sector, the impact. Even if when we speak about this recently signed FTAs, we can see special clause for these sectors, especially the dairy sector, processed dairy sectors. There was Australia and New Zealand, which are like giants in dairy sector, and India doesn't want a free trade agreement that time. See, secondly, we have China. India doesn't want a free trade agreement with China during that time. We cannot afford to have a free trade agreement. We already have huge trade deficit, which is of the volume of 85 billion US dollars, and we cannot let this again boom in the name of a free trade agreement. Secondly, what is interest for India, where India can capitalize? That is services. And there was no clarity on services under RCEP, and there was no free trade agreement under services under RCEP. So why should India sign an agreement where India has to make more compromises, much beyond what it can get back? Another strength area of India is people movement, and there was no liberalization on that regard also in RCEP. So it was countering, not in line with the interest of India. That's why India doesn't join RCEP. But again, maybe in the future India can change its stance, and right now Sri Lanka has joined RCEP. 25 years of India and France, a very, very important topic. Huge chance of coming in the examination. Hope video is clear. A lot of developments, a lot of editorials you can see on India-France relations, and it has culminated in 25 years of India-France relationships. So, what are the areas of cooperation between India and France? What are the countering, or you can say, concerns and challenges? What is way forward? I'm not going into details of this. You can go through this particular document. There is what is areas of cooperation. Majorly, we have seen increasing defense partnership. We have seen these Rafale flights coming from this France. We have seen maritime cooperation, where there is a lot of convergence in Indo-Pacific vision of France as well as India. There is space cooperations. There is civil nuclear cooperation, where this Jaitapur nuclear plant that is built in collaboration with France. There is economic cooperation, where the trade and investment both are on increasing trend. People to people ties, were especially in education, in higher education, we have strong interest from Indian people to France. So a lot of these are areas of you can say agreement between India and France, where challenges include defense procurement delays, trade imbalances, no free trade agreements, intellectual property rights, which India has problems with almost every major Western countries. Intellectual property rights, we have already known about the Novartis case, which is, you can say, a very contentious factor between India and other countries. Strategic autonomy, student mobility issues, were visas and other issues. Going ahead, implications of Israel-Hamas war on India. Again, we should be very cautious in learning this. We are not going to learn this Hamas-Israel war in its entirety, or in what exact developments, each and every development that is happening. Obviously, Hamas is playing a deadly game, and recently the leader has been murdered in Iran. And there is so much threat going on, coming into a full-fledged war by Israel versus Iran. So a lot of things are happening. What is India's interest? India's major interest is how it is going to impact oil prices. India still imports for around huge percent of its imports is coming from West Asia, especially from countries like Iran. 44% of its oil imports is coming from West Asia. So West Asia moving into a war, how it is going to affect India's oil prices? Increasing oil prices, it is going to increase India's import bills, it is going to increase inflation in India, it is going to increase these bank rates in India, economic growth in India, everything will be affected by this increasing oil prices. Trade disruptions, we can see Israel constitutes 7.8 billions of trade India is doing with Israel. Any escalation will further stops this increasing trade agreements with Israel. Maritime security concerns, we can see the Red Sea, Houthis attacking the ships. So these kind of issues are going to increase. Again, an economic factor, stock market volatility, terrorist and radicalization and security, foreign policy implications. So very important. Why it is important? Because in what is India's policy in West Asia? Dehyphenated policy. India will deal with Iran, India will deal with Saudi Arabia, India will deal with Israel, and India will deal with Palestine. This policy is one of the classical policy which found a lot of success for India, but it found success because there was no huge tensions in West Asia, no huge wars in West Asia. But now the West Asia is becoming more and more polarized. We can see change in stance in these. We can see a change in what is exactly the happening in West Asia. Indian policy might also be forced to take a stance which can be so much of detrimental to India's interest. So similarly, we have this Iran-Israel conflict also being covered. What is little bit details about the conflicts, but our interest of study should be on what are these implications of Iran-Israel relations on India. Then multilateral institutions, again revamping multilateral institutions, that is of too much of interest. So multilateral institutions, their role, why we are not able to change them. My whole objective of discussing the document is to give you a broad picture of this rest. You have to sit and learn each and every point of this. So what are the major challenges all the institutions in general is facing? Deteriorating multilateral system, issues facing multilateral organization, like Western dominance. You see the UNSC, we have this no single XYZ, whatever is the argument, like the Russia-Ukraine war is going on since 2 years, and UNSC has not been able to do anything credential. Why it is not able to do? Because these Western dominance, these countries has veto power. If something has to be brought against Russia, Russia will simply veto it and no decisions can be made. Same goes with Israel-Palestine. If Israel was bombing Gaza and doing this humanitarian crisis situation again Gaza, and anything that comes in UNSC against Israel, USA will veto it, even though USA has changed its stance in very recent past. But this is how it works. If a country, it is very difficult. If it is a issue is between two smaller countries, obviously UNSC holds a lot of strength and they can do something. But if the issue is between major countries, especially the countries which have veto power, there is absolutely nothing UNSC can do, and it simply becomes an organization of advocacy. And that is exactly what happened here also. Non-merit based selection. What is the basis for selecting these veto members? non-democratic representation, no permanent representation for Africa, no permanent representation for South America or Caribbean. So these all are like troubling. These people are losing the credibility as well as effectiveness of multilateral institutions. Power distribution, emerging complex global order like the rising China, rising India, multipolar global order, and this is the global organization is not representing the present day time situation. It is still holding on to the Second World War era systems. So these are all the issues and what are the way forward. Then specifically we have talked about UNSC reforms. Here why need for reforms, you can go through this. What is quite an important is different organization, what is their need of these reforms. There is also UNSC reforms everyone needs, but what kind of reforms is needed, that is different for every single person. For example, G4 nations, which are these G4 nations? Brazil, Germany, India, Japan. These are proposing that 6 new permanent members with veto power should be added to this group. Two from B should be from Asia and Africa, one from Latin America and Caribbean, and one from Western Europe. So it is essentially it is speaking for increasing the permanent membership in UNSC. Whereas uniting for consensus, that is the countries which are opposing these G4 reforms. It contains Pakistan, it contains Argentina opposing Brazil. So these countries are speaking for expanding the number of non-permanent seats rather than adding new permanent members to ensure broader representation without increasing veto power. So they are not want to increase the veto power. They simply want to increase the non-permanent members. Currently, UNSC has 15 members with 5 permanent members and 10 non-permanent members. They are asking to keep these 5 permanent members as it is and increase these non-permanent members so that this can become more democratic. African Union, it calls for, it is so much similar to G4 countries. It asks for at least 2 permanent seats and 5 non-permanent seats for African countries. United Kingdom and France, they mostly support the G4 proposal and suggest an intermediate solution of longer term renewable seats that could eventually become permanent. Like for India, they can give a longer term seat for in the UNSC. United States advocates for reforms, and it is basically an paper reforms which is based on enhancing transparency, accountability, and restricting the usage of veto. But that is quite an idealistic position US is taking. Then we have Turkey. Then we have a very interesting take by Noble World Foundation. It is saying that it suggests shifting membership and veto power to regional organizations like European Union to improve decision making and effectiveness. You can obviously use this point as a very good way forward agreement. That is saying this veto power, it should not be given to particular countries. It should be given to regional organizations like say something like ASEAN or European Union or African Union, or these organizations should be having this veto power, not these particular countries like USA, Russia, UK and all. Quite interesting. Then challenges, way forward, you can go through these. Why UNSC is ineffective in conflict resolution, we have already covered many of these points. You can go through this in detail. Next, a very very major organization, that is World Trade Organization. World Trade Organization. What World Trade Organization is all about? It is about facilitating trade, reducing the tariffs and non-tariff barriers between different countries. Almost it has a membership of 164 countries representing 98% of the global trade and GDP. Now, what is the problems in W trade organizations? You have a lot of issues from fishery subsidies to agricultural issues, mostly stalled negotiations and Doha agreement. You already know these agricultural subsidy issues. Developing countries do want more agricultural subsidies provision should be included in WTO agreement. Were developed countries opposing this, and this lead to obviously leading to conflict. We already know what is Doha agreement, and that is stuck at Doha agreement which happened in 2013, and there is no you can say, continuous progress even after a decade of this. You can see updating the rule book. That means there is a lot of change in trade that is happening. E-commerce has came into picture, digital trade has came into picture, climate change is becoming a much important factor. We have ideas like border carbon taxation, which is implemented by European Union. All these new developments is completely unaware in WTO's rule book. There is no consensus in updating the rule book of WTO. Dispute settlement body after 2017, due to this conflict of interest between USA and other countries, USA has stopped from appointing judges, and this whole appellate body has paralyzed, or you can say come into a standstill. And what people are using is these temporary arrangements are being used. One of the major functions of WTO was this dispute settlement, and that body is being non-functional since 2017. Secondly, trade wars, as we discussed already, between China and Russia, and when this whole trade war is opening, this is completely against the principles of WTO, increasing the tariffs or preferential tariffs on one or particular set of countries. All these are violating principles, fundamental principles of WTO. And when all this was happening, WTO was virtually non-existent. It was taking no stance, or it was incapable of taking any stance or pushing countries not to avoid or go into these kind of stances. Again, so rest of the elements you can go through this material. Going ahead, major takeaways from India's G20 presidency, one of the classical presidencies. I am not going into details of this. Major aspect is G20 versus G7 debate that was going on, whether G20 is a substitution to G7, or in modern times G20 is substituting G7 in significance. What is some of the strengths of G20? That is a broader representation. Obviously, it contains a long list of countries and 85% of the global GDP and 2/3 of the global population. Economic inclusivity at its countries includes broader countries like China, India, Brazil, etc. Global influence, because it has become a much broader organization for debating major issues. Crisis response, into whether it is to this 2008 financial crisis or to COVID-19 crisis, G20 has been in forefront to, you can say, fund related aspects, managing that. Crisis response, climate action, technological and digital advancements, strategic partnerships, all these give a certain advantage of G20 over G7. There are some supporting arguments for G7 also. You can go through the document. One major developments from G20 is the Global Biofuel Alliance to promote development and deployment of biofuels as a low carbon pathway to sustainable energy. You can learn some of the peculiar data from importance of biofuels, like India saved 73,000 crore rupees from import bills by promoting biofuels. IMEC, India Middle East Economic Corridor, very important, which was proposed and the materialized in G20. What it's all about. IMEC, India Middle East Economic Corridor. IMEC is a planned economic corridor aimed at enhancing connectivity and economic integration between Asia, Arabian Peninsula and Europe. That means instead of go through the Africa moving, we are making a rail, you can say ocean path, and you can say other, combining all three other elements. We are linking from Mumbai in India to this Saudi Arabia. Then from Saudi Arabia we are connecting through Mediterranean Sea to the Western Europe, Eastern Europe. So this is a huge plan of corridor that connecting India to the Europe, and this grant idea was also accepted in G20 meet. The significance of IMEC from economic point of view, from geopolitical point of view, from regional integration point of view, all this you can have some developments here. Then Abraham Accords, one of very critical development that happens in the West Asia. What is Abraham Accord? That is normalization of relation between different Arab countries with USA, which sorry, not USA, Israel. Which are these Arab countries like UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco, these countries, Arab countries, were not accepting or this Israel. So from these Arab Accords, they started giving diplomatic relations, established diplomatic relations with Israel. And this is one major reasons why India's dehyphenation policy in this particular West Asia was so successful, because it was not just time where India was looking at dehyphenation. It was a time when one section of these Arab countries, which is led by Saudi Arabia, has been showing a lot of tolerance or acceptance towards Israel, even though there was continuing hostility between Iran, Turkey versus this Israel. But this was not the case with the other side. The Saudi Arabia is coming more and more closer, at least economically, with Israel, and this gives the basis for India to launch its agreements, including this IMEC or I2U2, which we will be dealing next. The basis of all this is the Abraham Accords that started in 2020, where Israel was morally accepted by a section of Arab countries. I2U2, again, it is a group consisting of India, Israel, UAE, and United States. One is classical example of, you can say, complementary group. It is one of the most complementary groups you can see, where India has huge market potential, where Israel has huge technology which is looking for its markets, where UAE has huge amount of funds, huge amount of investment capabilities, where USA that is having a facilitator to this particular agreement. So a highly complementary grouping it is. It is said that this is a completely economic grouping which is not having too much of strategic role, but being said, this does hold such strategic importance, especially considering how this geopolitics in West Asia is progressing. Significance way forward. All this you can go through this. 20th ASEAN Summit. Yeah. 20th ASEAN Summit. That happened in September 7, 2023, and Prime Minister have visited is presented a 12-point proposal by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. You can go through this here. Mission Life, which is a huge component in most of these India's ideas, do have an take on this. Significance of our India-ASEAN relations. What are the challenges? What are the challenges of FTAs, economic challenges? All these are presented here. You can go through this. Again, next is about BRICS. We have discussed this also. I'm not going to go into details of this. What BRICS is experiencing is, it has already came up this with this new development bank, and Russia is proposing for a specific currency for BRICS to do the trade between these countries. Why Russia is interested in a new currency or new currency de-dollarization, or you can say non-dollar based economic system? Why Russia is looking for this? Because Russia is currently facing sanctions from US and Western countries, and Russia want alternative channels to trade. That's why Russia is pushing for this. And BRICS is one organization which have the capability, because it already have this new development bank. It have India, China, or these kind of countries, economic powerhouses like Brazil, and we have already expanded with Argentina and a lot of other countries. So they are all there who plays a very huge role, and they have this base to this particular happening. Now the more countries in Southeast Asia is looking for this, applying for this membership of BRICS. So the role of BRICS is obviously going to increase in the near future. First, you can go through this document. Indo-Pacific. What exactly is Indo-Pacific? It is a strategic geopolitical concept which has gained a lot of traction in the recent times. It represents interconnected space between Indian Ocean and, you can say, Pacific Ocean. This is the whole construct of Indo-Pacific. And as I already told, Indian policy is having two dimensions. In Indo-Pacific, Indian approach is aligning with US. In continental Asia, or you can say in Central Asian other policies, Indian policy is more or less in line with Russia. So in this India's strategic autonomy, or you can say multi approach, pronged approach that is having in waters, India is having policy that is in line with USA, that is Indo-Pacific what we are seeing. But in continental Asia, you can see Indian position that is too much in line with Russia. Significance of Indo-Pacific, significance of Indo-Pacific for free trade, significance of Indo-Pacific in modern times, all these are covered here. Challenges in Indo-Pacific. Why a lot of articles on Andaman and Nicobar? Because government has came up with a new development plan for Andaman and Nicobar. So one thing, development is happening. Secondly, the strategic importance because of its nearness to this Malacca Strait, the strategic importance of Andaman and Nicobar. We have this tri-service, try this military, navy and the Air Force. They are coming together to establish their command point at Andaman and Nicobar. So much of reasons Andaman and Nicobar is in news. So you can see around 12 points is given in exam. You don't need to write all the 12 points. We will be not hardly getting a complete question on this. You will be getting 2 questions regarding this if a question is coming. So if you go through this particular document, you can at least remember 5, 6, 7 points. That will like suffice your answer writing. Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, IPEF. Why IPEF is so much important is we after the Second World War, or the Bretton Woods institutions has came into existence. What we are seeing throughout is organization, countries which have strongly stood for globalization, whether it is USA, whether it is European countries, whether it is even developing countries, they have stood for globalization. What is globalization all about? It is free movement of goods, services, capital. Where capital will move to those countries which are most efficient. If I invested say 1 crore rupees and I can make 100 mobiles in one country, if I invested same 1 crore in some other countries, and if I can get 120 mobiles in the second country, whole investment I will divert to the second country. This is how capital functions in a globalization world. Where is the highest efficiency of production, their whole capital will flows. And this is how China has acquired this strength. Because China, by providing subsidies, by having very low wages, by having substantial government support, they have, by expanding their skill set education, they have created an environment of efficiency. And due to this, a lot of Western companies came and invested in China. This is how they acquired the current status of being an economic superpower. So if this whole thing was working very well till recent times. Recently what happened is USA is facing the heat. If we still let the investment flow to the China, China will come above our head, so we should do something. So this was first move by USA after the Second World War, where it is withdrawing itself from globalization. It is going against the core principles of globalization, and that particular organization is IPF. IPF, the core idea is, it is speaking that core idea is front shoring. It is speaking that we should not be limited by efficiency alone when we are investing or looking to establish factories or production systems. Efficiency of production should not be the only criteria. It should be other factors. If it is a friendly country, there should be preference given to this. So your production systems, your means of production should be established in friendly countries. That is the idea of front shoring, and that is the basis of IPEF. This is an anti-globalization organization. This is a, you can say, inflection point organization where you can say USA taking a stance against globalization. Rest all factual information, significance, you can go through these document. I'm not going into it. AUKUS, which is a trilateral security pact between United Kingdom, Australia and United States. Not an organization where India is directly involved, but since it is happening in Indo-Pacific, there is a lot of point of interest for India. quadrilateral security dialogue. There is time for getting strength and expanding. We have this idea of Quad Plus, which take into consideration the ASEAN countries also in to the ambit of the works that is being done by Quad. Challenges, all these factors are given here. You can go through this. NATO agreement, why it is important. Again, an organization India is not directly involved with, but again recently Sweden, Finland, these countries again joined NATO. What is the major reason behind this Russia-Ukraine crisis? That is also expansion of NATO into this Eastern Europe. So quite sometimes in news you can have a brief on this. What we have SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So 2023 summit happened in Astana, and a virtual summit was also happened. So SCO, that is an organization with huge potential, obviously. Huge potential because this is a statement of India's strategic autonomy. We are joining Quad. We are major defense partner of USA. On the other hand, we are joining SCO. What is SCO? SCO is an organization which is prima facie countering US in Central Asia. We are joining an anti or US organization in Central Asia, and we are standing up for Quad. So this is an organization. India's presence in this organization speaks volumes of India's strategic autonomy, India's strong adherence to strategic autonomy despite being increased closeness with USA. Being said, this is an organization with huge potential. Huge potential because be it resources, be it trade routes. We already know INSTC trade route which goes through this region. We already have huge trade potential with Central Asian economies, be it mineral resources like uranium, be it these rare earth elements, or be it even normal exports like oil or other exports. This has countries have huge potential. Again, for other reasons like education, for medical education, Indian students rely on these countries. So what is the whole picture? Security aspects, you can see the RATS organization which have so much of intelligence capabilities. So I'm speaking so much potential of this organization, but ineffective this is a sleeping organization. We have seen this in Afghanistan. When this Afghanistan crisis happened, this was one particular organization which could have took the lead role of handling crisis in Afghanistan, but have done nothing. Literally nothing it has done. Secondly, you can see even though this country have huge potential, there is striking difference in opinion. This China is pushing BRI through SCO, and India is always opposing to BRI. And there will be, if a statement is coming in support of BRI, India will not be voting for this. Similarly, this India's ideas are being collectively rejected by China and Pakistan and other countries. So you can see the individual, or you can say sectorial interest are, you can say, keeping this SCO under some kind of a cage. It is not realizing its true potential. Again, you can speak about RATS, which again has huge potential for intelligence gathering in the region. It can be expanded for this cross-country anti-terrorism organization or cross-border terrorism activities. It can be expanded. Huge security potential, still not explored. That is the final verdict on SCO. Then we speak about Indian diaspora. Again, this is a little bit on Indian diaspora. Who are all Indian diaspora? It is not just an NRIs, it also includes persons of Indian origin. Kamala Harris, who is running for US president from Democratic Party, again, she is also have Indian origins. Now, the Trump recently has questioned her Indian origin or African origin or what kind of origin she has. So we have around 31 million Indian diaspora, 13 million NRIs, and 18 million person of Indian origins. This, for particularly for every sections or every country, what are the issues being faced, what can be the way forward. We have dealt this in detail in MIBs. Go through the document. Sports diplomacy, especially when this Olympics is going on. It is also in news because of the potential of Olympics to bring countries together, to bring some kind of fraternity between countries. So cricket diplomacy, Should India play this ICC Champions Trophy, upcoming Champions Trophy in Pakistan? Or if India boycott, then what will be the future of these ICC events? All this being in news, so quite an important aspect. Is emerging global order bipolar? These are some of the specific editorials being asked. Gujral doctrine, which I have already discussed. There is 25 years of Gujral doctrine, so little bit important. Present day significance, that is where questions can come, which you should study. Case of 8 former Indian Navy officers in Qatar, quite a very important case, but from exam point of view, you can use this as an example. No specific questions is being expected. Challenges before nuclear order, you can go through this India's non-NPT agreement, India, how China is restricting India, all this. India's FTA, EFTA, that is India signed with this economic partnership with European Free Trade Association. 4 countries are a part of it, and what is its significance, what is its future, how it impact the broader FTA with EU, like the BTIA agreement, how it will play a role. India's renewed interest, which we have already discussed, why India in 2020 is signing so much of FTAs. 2-3 reasons are there. If you remember the COVID times, even though so many things are going bad, India has nearly achieved its ambitious trade export target of 400 billion exports. Now, this was a huge momentum that is given to India. Secondly, there was huge sentiments against China. And how this sentiment against China is materializing? This sentiment against China is materializing in relocating Chinese industries to other parts of the world, and India was one of the favorable destinations. Thirdly, we have seen the trade war between US and China is happening. Due to all these factors, there is some scope or you can space available for India to push its exports. So this may be a time where India can come and leverage this different trade positions. So that is to exploit this opportunity which has came out from COVID, from Chinese positions, from other geopolitical tensions. It is due to this, in midst of all of this, India is looking for an FTA or increased interest in FTA. India is looking for FTA with all major different countries. Space diplomacy, again, very much important, with a lot of privatization going on. Even an Indian scientist, or you can say space astronaut, is going into space with this US mission of Axiom 3, Axiom 4 into this International Space Station. These are trained in Russia, trained in France. So there is collaborations happening between different countries. Oh, all this has been captured. Proposed WHO pandemic treaty, which is a dedicated treaty to address this pandemic related aspects. Again, this is being opposed by a lot of countries regarding sovereignty concerns, regarding IPR concerns, regarding other collective interest concerns. So it is still an ideation. This is still not seen the light. It is still being proposed and ideated. So I think paradiplomacy, which speaks about the states, or you can say subnational units, taking up the diplomatic activities, like the Kerala government have done some regards in Gujarat, the Vibrant Gujarat Summit, you might be well aware of. Similarly, the UP government also recently did something. All this has an implication on paradiplomacy. Its significance is all presented here. So on that note, I know I have run through the topics. I know this is not something I want to teach you each and everything. What I want to tell you is, you already know the framework. That is the basis of international relations preparation. Second, read the MIB booklet. Read the current affairs booklet. I'm assuring you the 50 marks is in your pockets if you do this. That's all for now. On this note, we will wind up the session. Thank you so much.